Another extraordinary weekend in the sport of boxing, another fight that is going to go down into the history books, another couple of performances that stretch the bounds of human possibility, another weekend, Matt, when we're on the edge of our seats and the sport delivers once again. Quite stirring, sensational, at times unbelievable courage from Wardley and Dubois. What a fight. What another weekend for boxing.
You were on the edge of your seat. You're also kind of cowering behind your hands at certain points. And Elliot Wurzel wrote an exceptional kind of reflection piece on the story, saying, because the tagline, of course, was "Don't blink," but by the end, all you wanted to do was close your eyes. It was awe-inspiring effort from both fighters, and one of the most brutal fights I've ever seen. I was thinking yesterday, because the question now is what next for Fabio Wardley? Can he come back? And I was kind of looking through brutal heavyweight fights, brutal heavyweight beatings in history to then kind of suggest what happened to the person that was on the wrong end of that beating. Did they ever come back? And it was really, really difficult to find a comparable fight. The obvious ones, of course, are Frazier Ali 3. They've kind of just, that it's taken something from both of them. But in terms of what that took from Wardley, it's really hard to pinpoint other examples in heavyweight history where someone stood up to what Fabio Wardley stood up. And I do think it will affect his future, unfortunately.
In or out of the ring. And yeah, you suspect there has to be marks there. I mean, his face is already badly marked up. His nose has been damaged pretty much from day one, hasn't it? And you only have to look at Wardley, stare at him at the face-off, and he starts to bleed pretty much. But he took so many heavy shots. He dished out so many heavy shots. And it was a roller coaster from start to finish, Matt. It was a roller coaster in terms of the action. It was a roller coaster in terms of emotions as a viewer as well. I suspect it was exactly that for the fans who were there, contributing towards that bristling atmosphere, and in truth, probably contributing in their own way to the way the fight unfolded and the atmosphere that we enjoyed. But it could have all been over so early, or it might have been. It threatened to be, with Dubois on his knee in the first and in the third.
It was a stunning start, wasn't it? What was it, about 20 seconds into the first round, and Dubois is on the canvas. It was quite a clever little move that Fabio Wardley was employing, kind of nudging the left arm of Dubois away and then crashing through with the overhand right. And he worked for him again in the third. Almost now, when you look back on it, you wonder if it worked a bit too early for him, because in moments of jeopardy, and that jeopardy was increasing probably from round 6-7 onwards for Wardley, instinctively he would keep bowling over that right hand. But by then Dubois was wise to it. 1 or 2 was still getting through to kind of keep it exciting. But largely Dubois had figured that out, whereas Wardley kept reverting to that particular move where he would remember that he'd had such great success with it early on in that fight. And I would say in round 3, he's probably thinking he's got the fight won. But a breathless start. Credit to Dubois. I mean, there's times where you see Dubois in that kind of trouble. And like last week's podcast, I said, Dubois doesn't just go over from one shot. He did. He went over from one shot, got up, and he's almost a bit panicky. And you see that with him when he's instinctively looking to the corner for advice. He needs help. But he worked through it. And I think last week as well, we mentioned that Dubois has had trouble in the past with following instructions. We referenced something that Shane McGuigan had said, but he appeared to listen to the instruction. He might have needed a slap on the face from Don Charles. But what I was impressed with Dubois was the way that he was repositioning himself. He was moving back, taking steps back. He was taking the play away from Fabio Wardley, and he was coming back in with that jab, double jab, right hand to follow, and he was having real success with it. And ultimately, I think it is kind of the grasp of the fundamentals that was the difference between them. In the end, Wardley was just, he's got this incredible will to win, this incredible desire. He's fighting on instinct, whereas Dubois, out the two, was by far the most cultured.
We'll come back to it because how ironic that it was the boxing smarts, technique and tactics of Wardley early on that looked like it was going to be the decisive factor. How ironic, because most people would have thought that Wardley was going to get through on toughness, punching power, and probably durability. And ultimately, it was that kind of gave up on him. And it was Dubois whose persistence and perseverance and own courage and own punching power, ultimately the combination of those were absolutely the telling factor in the fight. But it's interesting, we'll come back to that, Matt, because that's the big story. Those are the big stories of this fight. But the way that Dubois managed those difficult early moments, we did touch on last week, didn't we, in the preview about knowledge, intelligence, know-how, culture, whatever it is that makes sort of Dubois such a fascinating and at times difficult to interview character. We nudged at some of those, the heart at some of that. And I think you saw it at play in the third round, where it was almost a preordained move when he took that knee in the third round. It was so quick. And I think really it was almost too quick for the punch that had landed. But it seemed a bit like David Haye before he went out to fight Jean-Marc Mormec in Levallois, where he and Adam Booth had practiced the sort of tumbling and disorientation and all of that, just in case. So they were ready for the big hit. So they were ready. It looked to me like that was, if not a practice move, then something that Dubois and his corner, Don Charles and the team, something that they'd really focused on and talked about is a way to manage those difficult moments. If you're hurt or if you need to buy yourself some time, how do we go about that? And it looked like a learned move. It looked a little bit odd and it looked a little bit too soon, but I think it was crucial. I think it was essential. And I think it shows that maybe Dubois can listen or that he can still learn, even at this stage of his career. I thought that was a fascinating moment, Matt, in the third, and maybe a crucial one too.
I mean, we forget with Daniel Dubois, there is this perception that he's just this stupid big lump that can't string a sentence together. And just because he hasn't got the mental dexterity to evade questions when he can't quite find the answers pre-fight, doesn't mean that he hasn't built up some kind of in-ring intelligence and ring experience throughout his career, because he's been through a lot in his career. He's kind of experienced the highest highs. He's had the lowest of lows, because when you are accused of being a quitter, that is, in boxing terms, the worst word that people can throw at you. But it does appear that he has learned his lessons in certain fights, and he certainly listens to Don Charles, perhaps in a way that he didn't with Shane McGuigan, or perhaps he's now learned that he has to listen. And the fact that he did kind of take that break, reasserted himself after that, and then you look at how the fight developed with Fabio Wardley taking hellacious shots and almost not allowing himself to take a backward step, not allowing himself to, it didn't even occur to him that he goes down, because it's almost like everybody has bought into this Fabio Wardley is indestructible, including Fabio himself. I can't go down. The corner have been accused of being too brave. They will know what Fabio's all about. They will have given him every chance. I think the referee perhaps gave him every chance because of this whole reputation that Fabio Wardley has forged throughout his career, that you never write him off. You never... he can come back. He can still land that one shot. He can still win it. But yeah, Dubois, it's the best performance of his career to date, I thought. And the fact that he was still doing what he was doing in rounds 10 and 11, because I did wonder, we know that he got Jarrell Miller out of there in the 10th round, but it wasn't a hard fight like it was against Wardley. But then he gets Hrgovic out in 8. Then he gets Joshua out in 5, and you think, well, can he keep motoring forward like that? Can he be that formidable presence like that in a distance fight? And he proved that he could on Saturday night.
Absolutely. And he proved that he has the requisite courage, the minerals, the stuff. He proved that his punching power persists throughout a contest. And ultimately it was that, as well as his stubbornness, durability, heart and courage. It was that in tandem with the power, Matt, that really were the two decisive factors here.
Yeah, it was. And you kind of wondered also about Dubois' mindset going into that fight, given the way that fight week was developing for him. I started to find it all a little bit distasteful, if I'm honest. Just this whole, here's another clip of Daniel Dubois. Look at him, he can't handle this question. He's walked out of an interview. And you could see kind of Fabio Wardley growing in confidence during fight week, in that you must be thinking, well, look at, Daniel Dubois finding an interview difficult, and he walked out of at least two. So if he's finding an interview difficult and his instinct is to walk out, we've seen him also do similar things in a boxing ring. I'm going to break his heart. And it gets to the point after the weigh-in where you've got that ridiculous cauldron thing where you've got Daniel Dubois essentially just stood there in his pants, really uncomfortable. He's already endured a week of nonsensical and ridiculous pantomime-style questions. And then he's being made to stand there next to Fabio Wardley and answer questions from Simon Jordan. And Dubois was deeply uncomfortable. But what I drew from that is that if he keeps putting himself through those situations where he feels uncomfortable, perhaps we should give him credit for that. He hates doing an interview. He told me in 2018, I hate doing interviews. That hasn't changed. He just realizes he has to, and he keeps putting himself in that situation. And I did think that by the time the opening bell rings, Dubois is going to be like an uncaged animal. And he might well have been as well, hence why he got caught so early. But I do think that the way he felt he was kind of being treated in fight week would have only have added to that determination to win the fight for Daniel Dubois. And that's what I think that played a part in the contest as well.
Very brief sideline, just because you've nudged at it. I didn't watch it. I try not to watch too much of that stuff. I should do as a broadcaster, but if I'm not bothered about it, then I tend not to bother about it. But that Simon Jordan piece style, that segment, is there a place for that?
There might well be a place for it. Look, Simon Jordan, who I have got certain respect for, I think a lot of the time I think he talks sense. I think for too long now he's been too drunk on his own sense of wisdom. He thinks that everything he says is the right thing. But he is a really solid broadcaster, an opinionated broadcaster. Exactly kind of what people need now with social media, and you can share these little clips, etc., etc. So maybe there is a place for it. Maybe there's a place for it at these mind-numbing open workouts. Maybe there's a place for it at the opening ceremony, which I just think are so tired and so old and such a waste of time. You never get, as a journalist, you never get anything from them. So perhaps there's a place then. I always think the weigh-in itself is enough. It's always interesting to me to see the two fighters the day before battle, but I don't think getting them nose to nose and agitating them at that particular point in time is the best and most intelligent time to do it. I think it's disrespectful to the boxers that at that point, all they want to do is rehydrate. And I'm aware that the majority of these weigh-ins are ceremonial weigh-ins, so you're not going to get them as they jump off the scale when they are at their, and obviously be talking about a lighter weight than heavyweight. But it's also the last thing they need. They've earned that time to just have 24 hours before the fight. They don't need to be doing any more media. I think they already do too much during fight week, which might be odd for someone who is always desperate for copy and quotes to do my job. But no, I don't think there's a place for it at the weigh-in. There certainly might be a place for it within fight week. But how much more have they got to say? We have this kind of one-on-one thing where they sit down after the first press conference and they get in each other's faces, and you've got that. You've got the press conference where they're encouraged to berate each other again there. You've got that. So do we need to do it again after the weigh-in? In my opinion, no. At that point, leave them to it. Show them some respect. Have some awareness of what they're going to go through the next day and what they've put their bodies through to get to that point. So, yeah, in my opinion, no. Could do without it.
Maybe the timing of it. Okay. Just going back to the sort of try and sort of get ourselves out of the giddy drunkenness and appreciation of the fight, and talk about maybe what it is that and how it unfolded and some of the tactics. I do think that And maybe understandably, because he was clipped and hurt, or hurt and hurt a couple of times so early on. Daniel Dubois, it might have been his Carl Froch moments or Carl Froch versus George Groves in the first fight. It might have been a big element of that at play for Dubois, in so much as he just had to fight through the pain, fight through clearing his head till he got to a point where he was able to maybe perform a little more comfortably, if that's the right phrase, probably not, or just fight a little more naturally, capably than maybe he was in those early rounds, because he was quite static, head movement. He was very, very hittable. He was quite slow, wasn't he, through most of the fight? And he kind of just ground it out, Matt. I think it was a kind of grind for him, but he did grind. And I think that's what was required on the night. But it was hard work, and it was a grind all the way throughout. I had him pretty much winning every round from the third on. After the third, I had him pretty much just edging or just winning every round, but it was a grind all the way. And the reason I mention that is because we'll come back to how the fight was refereed, how the fight was doctored, how the fight was cornered, because I think all of that is at play, really, in terms of your growing discomfort with the brutality of it as the fight wore on.
It was a grind, and I think that version of Fabio Wardley would have made it a grind for any heavyweight on the planet, to be honest. I think even like Justice Hooney, who appeared to be winning every round probably more comfortably than Daniel Dubois was, would still not have found that a particularly pleasant experience in the ring with someone like Fabio Wardley. I think what Dubois did show as early as the first round, though, was what we've kind of already touched on, is some almost like veteran-like experience. Even the way that he bundled Fabio Wardley to the ground in the first round was him essentially just, okay, well, I'm going to exert my strength on you. I'm going to make it a bit uncomfortable. I'm going to have a break. But yeah, full credit to Daniel Dubois. And I think it does. You see that fight, and it's incredible that we've questioned his heart as many times as we have. And I think it does genuinely come back to what we explained last week, in that when he's up against someone like an Alexander Usyk, so clever, so many different gears to go into, so many different styles to showcase, that psychological Daniel Dubois starts to believe he can't win that. When it is a battle of wills, when it is a straight fight, Dubois backs himself. And he really backed himself on Saturday, and he had to. And I saw, and you kind of mentioned there, I agree with you, Daniel Dubois was winning the rounds from the third or fourth onwards. And I think it was Max Kellerman that said something recently saying, we can't call it a great fight when Dubois was in control for so much of it. I disagree, because there was always that sense that Wardley could turn it around. And even when it was getting uncomfortable to watch, when it was so one-sided, Wardley would have the odd moment where we know what we know about Dubois, we know what we know about Wardley, and you do wonder if there could all of a sudden be a turnaround. So I can understand to a degree why everybody involved in that fight, and this is probably to get to the next bit of what we're going to talk about, why everybody involved in that fight was allowing it to continue, as in the referee and Fabio Wardley's corner. Now, Ben Davison came out and he released a statement the following day because there was an awful lot of criticism about him failing to pull Fabio Wardley out earlier. I do think that a lot of that is because of what he knows from Fabio Wardley, what he's seen in the gym, what he's seen in fights. So I think that he was treating Fabio Wardley differently to how he would treat someone else who he was seen get knocked out, who he was seen get dropped. But you look at it from the view that we were looking at it from, and the very obvious facial injuries to Fabio Wardley, the power shots that were connecting flush time and time again, Wardley stumbling when he's seeing a doctor, Wardley stumbling when he's not taking a shot. It became, for me, so difficult to watch. it became that kind of fight where the worst thing happens. And it was almost as if the referee was desperate to be told to stop it, wasn't it? You calling in the doctor twice, was it? He called the doctor in. By the time you're doing it, if you're doing it for a second time, you are surely thinking there's something wrong with this fighter here. I need to be told. If you look at a highlights package and you see where the stoppage occurred, you say that Howard Foster did the right thing. Perfect stoppage at that point where Wardley had taken a shot, really bad shot. His head had been knocked backwards. He's almost instinctively turning towards the ropes. The referee jumps in and stops it. But it's when you're watching the fight as a whole and you see Wardley take those kind of shots for 3 or 4 rounds consecutively that you think, should that really have continued that long?
I think rounds 10 and 11 where it's getting really difficult and increasingly difficult to watch. I was at home. We had a couple rounds, some friends round for dinner on Saturday night. So I wasn't sitting down watching the entire card live as it was, but because it was such a late start to Wardley Dubois around 11 o'clock or thereabouts, and the night was getting on, I sort of clicked it on so that I could watch and they watched, and they're, follow sport, but not boxing fans. They loved the fight. This couple, they absolutely loved it. But I think all of us were getting towards squeamish rounds 10 and 11. You can't stop it before then, I don't think, because both were hurt in the ninth. The ninth was a give and take, two-way seesaw fight. So really, I think the discussion goes into the 10th round. Ben Davison said he didn't see that stutter, that stagger that the rest of us saw. So he can't act on something that he didn't see. And that is fair because that is part of our decision making. So if that's at play for us, then it wasn't at play for him. So that is at least true in some way. The question now is who should take responsibility for that, and is there a bigger question at play? Because afterwards, Frank Warren said that's the best heavyweight fight I've ever put on. And then asked about the stoppage, he says, when they're in brutal fights like that, better to be safe than sorry. Now, the problem with that phrase is, and this isn't a knock on Frank, that's the kind of phrase that many of us or many people would say in the sport of boxing. The problem with that line is better to be safe than sorry. People mean that about that fight, that moment on the night. No one's thinking 10, 20 years down the line. Nobody. And I think we all have to think about 10, 20 years down the line. Now, that's a difficult discussion because it has an impact on live sport, it has an impact on careers, it has an impact on the trajectory of careers. And that's a lot to consider in just moments. But I think it's fair to ask whose responsibility is that? Is it the teams closest to the boxers who work with them each and every day? Should the referee just take absolute and full responsibility for that? Because I think you're right. I think Howard Foster is gently pleading for assistance. And maybe he doesn't need to plead. Maybe he just needs to act in that regard and take responsibility for it. Maybe the corner should. Maybe the doctor should as well. There was a lot at play there, Matt, and it's an impossible position, I accept, for all of them. But if a good portion of people are watching that in rounds 10 and 11 thinking, okay, boys, men, fighters, human beings, you've done enough here. You have done enough here. I don't need to see any more. I don't need any more from you. If we're feeling it, surely those people close to it are feeling it too.
Yeah, I mean, you have to take Ben Davison to his word when he said that they didn't see that, and there was a conversation. Actually, they were talking at that moment where he stumbled. That's I believe that to be true, that they didn't see it there at that point. Um, Ben Davison isn't like a monster and wanting his fighter to get hurt. If he'd have seen him stumble like that, I have every confidence in Ben that he would have stopped the fight. We've seen Ben stop fights before, and as he alluded to in that statement, look, I've done it before. I threw the towel in with Lee Wood. I just didn't think he could carry on, and I got criticised for that. Now I'm getting criticised for this. And this is the thing. And if it had been stopped, say if they'd have stopped it in the ninth, there would have been an awful lot of people saying, have you forgotten what Fabio Wardley is all about? Have you forgotten what he's done in his last few fights? So it's very rare that you'll get a stoppage where everyone agrees with it. There's always an argument to say the fight could have continued, or the fighter should have been saved earlier, and that's really difficult. Howard Foster as well has been accused more than once of stopping fights too early. We don't know how much that is kind of the criticism that he got, and we know that his family received some horrible treatment in the aftermath of the Carl Froch George Groves fight. So you don't know how that affects him in the thick of a fight like that. But whose responsibility is it? You would think that someone would know. And I watched the Barry McGuigan interview this morning before we started recording this. Barry McGuigan said that, okay, yeah, fair enough. You kind of want to give your fighter all the chances in the world, but surely when you're in that corner, you can see that your fighter isn't the same man anymore. You can see that drain from them. You can see the injuries just piling up on their face. Surely there comes a point where you pull your fighter out. And he wasn't trying to be critical of Ben Davison necessarily. But what he did say, which I thought was interesting, is that the fact that that fight went on as long as it did has probably robbed Fabio Wardley any chance of winning a rematch. That if he had been pulled at the end of the 8th or 9th, it'd have been like, job done here. We've learned a lot. Let's come out of this before anybody gets too hurt. But boxing isn't like that. And you can't expect any boxer in the world to want to go through that. And this is the other thing to consider. Do you know? Does anybody who listens to this know? Has anybody been privy to the conversations between Ben and Fabio before that fight and the conversations that they've had throughout their journey together? You never stop a fight that I'm in, Ben. Never, ever stop. Never, ever pull me out unless I ask you to. All sorts of things goes on. And you have to cling to as well, even though I think this is a big reason why the fight went on too long, it might also be justification why it lasted as long as it did. And that is Fabio Wardley's career to date. There were times in the Frazier-Clark fight where he looked like he wasn't going to win. He looked like he was being outboxed. We saw what he did against Justice Hooney. Joseph Parker was another astonishing turnaround when he wasn't expected to. And the fact that he was at times still firing back, there will have been at the back of minds of people with it who were involved in that contest, like, my God, can he do it again? Because there was a moment where I thought, Daniel Dubois has given so much here, and Wardley is still firing back. Is Dubois just going to walk into one? Even as uncomfortable as I was watching it, I was thinking it was still a possibility. So I could sit here and go, it was stopped too late. But that was at the back of my mind, and I'm sitting at home. I'm not responsible for Fabio Wardley's accomplishments and his future and everything else. I'm not responsible for the fight like Howard Foster. And if I'm thinking those kind of things, and I'm sure they were too.
Absolutely right. And that conversation about knowing your fighter, knowing what he or she's capable of, knowing their history and what they've done before, absolutely. That makes it very difficult, probably nigh on impossible, really. And I think I'm almost certain we'll be having this exact same conversation about a Conor Walker fight within the next year or so. I'm absolutely certain of it. And that decision for Jamie Moore and Nigel Travis is going to be hard, because that guy, that young man, has got miles on the clock. That young man keeps getting tuned up. That young man keeps getting beat up and looking like he's going to struggle to get through it, never mind win the fight. But he keeps on doing it. And they know that. He knows that. They both know he's got it in him. They're going to face that moment. maybe in a more difficult fight, maybe in a harder fight, maybe in a fight where he's getting more hurt more regularly, more often. They're going to reach that moment. I'm convinced of it. And we're going to be thinking about this, feeling this, I think, on another day further down the line. So it is very, very emotive, very, very difficult. And obviously, when we're watching it removed at home, the picture might be a little clearer than if you were emotionally attached, career attached, almost umbilically attached at those moments inside the ring. That is hard. It is so hard. But these people are in place, Matt, to help and protect the boxers. And they have a job that we don't have. And it's a difficult one, but it's hard not to watch. I mean, I say you can't really stop it before the ninth, I don't think, because of that two-way give and take in the ninth round. But it's hard not to watch 10 in particular and then 11 and look at Wardley and look at the way he's depleted and he's getting hurt and his reactions. You can see it in his body that he's becoming diminished on that night. And it's hard not to think that it could have, should have been stopped. But there's a lot at play here.
There is a lot of play, and I absolutely think it should have been stopped. After everything that I've said, I absolutely think it should have been stopped. I'm surprised, and I was surprised that it wasn't stopped. It's so difficult to put yourself in another person's shoes, particularly when those shoes are ringside and you're nowhere near it. But in terms of kind of the eye test, particularly when Wardley stumbled when he wasn't under pressure. He stumbled when he was just kind of being led in a direction. His legs were not under him, and it had been a while before since he'd taken any shots. That to me was the moment where surely someone in and around that ring saw that and said, "We've got to stop this."
And I think Ben Davison pretty much agrees, or to a large extent, I think he agrees as well. It's easy to think that this is a difficult fight for Wardley to come back from just because of the damage on the night. It's easy perhaps to overlook how hard and trench-like a fight it was for Daniel Dubois. I don't think it's too difficult to imagine both of them shipping wear and tear through those 11 rounds. But it might be easier for fans to dismiss how much punishment Dubois took on the night, even although it was his heavy hands that were doing most of the damage. But he was hurt repeatedly. He was down twice early on in the fight. He had to really grind his way through that battle. And it was a bloody battle, wasn't it? He wasn't marked up quite in the same way that Wardley was, but it would be easy to dismiss the punishment and damage that Dubois took on the night, Matt.
Yeah, it was so grueling. You know, I know they're big, muscly brutes. They're human beings, and yeah, that was some serious warfare that both of them endured. More so Fabio Wardley. I'm more concerned about Fabio Wardley. And given his character, one would think that he will be eager to get back in the ring as soon as possible. But you look at what Fabio, like the Fraser Clark fight, remember we was talking about that?
Oof,
The first Fraser Clark fight was another hellacious slugfest. Joseph Parker was a grueling night. Justice Hooney, for different reasons, would have put some miles on the clock, and now you've got this on top of it.
That's four. That's four on the bounce, Matt. And I to be honest, I think when you try and look dispassionately, when I watch a fight like that, I mean, we marvel at it, and it is astonishing and bewildering and amazing, all in equal measure. I mean, we just can't thank them enough for what it is that they gave. We can't appreciate that enough for what we saw. But I woke up on Sunday morning, and the first person that springs to my mind is Fabio Wardley. And when I see these fights and I see those efforts, I always end up there on a Sunday morning, and I just think, how is he feeling? What's his body saying to him? What is that hurt and pain like? What is that sort of silent conversation between each other? What is that like? What is that experience like through these hours on Sunday morning? I try and imagine it, and I just can't get anywhere near really thinking and knowing what that must feel like.
No, you can't. I mean, the vast majority of us will never experience kind of a beating like that and then dealing with the aftermath. And you see people that, they've been out on a Saturday night and there's some maniac has punched them or whatever, and they got stitches the next day. But the amount of punishment that Wardley and Dubois took on that night, you can only imagine how they feel on Sunday. It was one of those fights where, like you, first thing I thought of on Sunday morning was Fabio Wardley, and I'm reaching off for my phone just to make sure there's no evidence of him in a bad way. It really was, like you say. I've got, oh my gosh, I've said it so many times, but these people, they're just like superheroes to me. I can't compare them to you and I. They're just on another level with what they put themselves through and how on earth they do it. Yeah, oh gosh, stubbed my toe last week, and anyone would have thought I'd been shot. Really hurt. And I just how do these people do it? How do these people do it? But then you have to remember they are human beings, and you have to remember there's only so much of that punishment that they can take. I think they're superhuman, but they're not. They're human beings.
No, and that's it, Matt. In different ways, but with a similar theme, Wardley's had 4 of those on the bounce. And I don't know, you had a good conversation about this with the late great Emmanuel Stewart. You had a good conversation about this, on this theme, with these ideas. How many of those fights does any fighter have in them? Should they be able to suffer, endure, go through? How many, really? 4 on the bounce seems a lot. 2 of them, absolute epics, Fraser Clark and now Daniel Dubois. That does seem like you're pushing it to me. If you're looking at the balance and longevity and health and happiness in the afterlife, that seems a lot.
Well, Emmanuel Stewart used to say that after a fight like that, you need at least 12 months off. And if you're not giving yourself 12 months off, all you're doing is you're adding to the long-term damage that you're going to suffer from. You need to completely take a break. And that's what, if Fabio Wardley is to continue, and I suspect he will, and I know the temptation will be, I can't go away for a year and be forgotten about. There's a lot going on in the heavyweight division at the moment. We don't know how much longer Alexander Usyk has got. All of a sudden, the belts are going to be, there's going to be various belts that are going to be available, presuming Usyk does walk away or whatever he does. And Wardley will want to be in that mix. And if you take away our concerns, because these are not concerns that necessarily everybody will have, but if you take away our concerns from it, Wardley is one of the most reliable heavyweights in the division at the moment for giving fans value for money, for putting bums on seats, for delivering fight of the year contenders. Wardley's probably the biggest thrill seeker in that division. Therefore, there will always be someone to say, "Here you go, pal. Let's stick you in. Let's stick you in again here with this." But I would hope that the people around Fabio will say, "Just take a step back for a while. Give it a good few months before you even think about stepping foot back in the ring." And I include sparring and all of that with it. Go and have a break. He's earned it. And I can't turn around here and say, "Fabio Wardley, you should retire." Given where he is in the sport, everybody'd still put him in the top 10 heavyweights in the world. But I most certainly think that he should be encouraged to think really, really carefully about his future, not just in the sport, but in life. Think really, really careful carefully about that. And this is where it all comes back down to education, doesn't it? Which we spoke about plenty of times. But we're dealing with boxers here. And as Fabio Wardley posted in the aftermath of the fight, my heart never let me down, and I'm proud of that. And to him, that is his badge of honour, that he stayed on his feet.
Yeah, I can live with that. My body gave up, but my heart didn't. I can live with that, said Fabio Wardley. He also went on to say and thank everyone who's kind of been along with him on the journey. I don't know if that was hinting at a walk away, and that it sort of almost sounded like that, didn't it?
It did a little bit. And I tell you what, the other thing that was striking during fight week, and it may have been that kind of Daniel Dubois was his foil, but Wardley has always been very, very naturally charismatic. He's good with how he articulates. There's a career for him in broadcasting. I'm sure of it. If he did choose to hang up the gloves.
31, Fabio Wardley, but those 4 hellish fights on the bounce, and engaged in an absolute thriller, one for the ages. The best heavyweight fight I've ever put on, said Frank Warren, and amen to that. Hopefully you appreciate why a fight like that nudges you in all sorts of directions, not just cheerleading. What a fantastic fight it was. It does raise all sorts of different issues as well. And where does Daniel Dubois go next? Of course, is one of the questions that comes out of it. I mean, he's earned himself another spot at the table, Matt, hasn't he? I think we spoke last week about Moses Atoma and the direction he was going in. Ajit Kabayal as well, of course. Frank Warren and Queensberry have got those chess pieces to move. In which direction do you think they're going to be moving?
Oh, I don't know. I mean, they did say, didn't they, that Fabio Wardley has got the right to trigger a rematch because he was the champion going into it. So will he do that? Maybe he will do that. It would sell, wouldn't it? A rematch between Wardley and Dubois. I think I've already made my feelings quite clear on it. You could imagine a fight with Moses Atoma being made if all of the faith is being put in Atoma for the future. I would say that would be a winnable fight for Atoma. I feel like that could be another one where Dubois might have a little bit of doubt going into it, in the way that he did with Alexander Usyk. And whether they'll just get Dubois a title defense, some more money in the bank before unleashing him on Atoma, I don't know. I think there's so many options out there for him. I'd like to see him go in with Fury or something like that. I'd still be interested in a Joshua rematch, for example. But we will see. We will see how Queensberry decide to move their various pieces that they've got in this ever fascinating heavyweight division.
And what a wacky weekend, wasn't it, in a way? Zach Chelli beating David Morrell with a come from behind late stoppage. David Morrell, who's been the distance with Benavidez. Zach Chelli with a knockout record that wouldn't compare, a fighting resume that wouldn't get close. Boxing, man. My goodness me. What a win for Zach Chelli.
Out of this world. Unfortunately for him, completely overshadowed by what went on in the main event. Everybody is talking about the main event. And that is sometimes the danger when you stack these cards. It was a great card from Frank and Queensberry and George. A terrific card. But the danger is when you stack them and then you have got several good fights on there, some of them get forgotten about. But I think when it gets to the end of year awards and people are working out what the upset was, surely it's going to be this one. I compared it to, exceptionally disrespectfully with hindsight, like Jay Opetaya's run when he's fight, Jay Opetaya versus Ellis Zorro or Jay Opetaya versus Jordan Thompson. I compared it to that. beforehand. But Chelly, who is, if you followed his career and you followed his story, he's someone that's like boxing through and through. A bit like, what's his name? What's his name? Jazz Dickens. There we go. It's there. A bit like
Keep
Jazz
clawing.
Dickens, where you know they've from a kid they've wanted to rule the world and what have you. Morale, but you wouldn't have. Nobody thought that Zach Chelly could do that, and it was. He just caught him at the end of the ninth, and you're like, wow, he's on the brink of going here. I think Barry Jones said it, he's gone. And then in the 10th, you think Morell's rode out that storm, and then with about 30 seconds left, he's out cold on his feet. Sensational result. Morell perhaps took it lightly, took it at short notice. About 2 weeks, I think that fight was announced. So whether Morell took it lightly, but that fight is a lesson to a fight that we'll probably talk about in a minute, is that had that fight not occurred, I would be writing off Dave Allen against Filip Hrgovic at the weekend to such an extent that it would appear that Dave Allen's got zero chance, because that is what I thought Zach Chelly had going into that fight, to be perfectly honest. And he proved me so wrong.
Yeah, the bookies, the odds would have agreed with you, Matt. And to be honest, the balance of play would agree with that as well. Let's be absolute. I mean, it's a fantastic story, and it is what boxing can dish up, but it was against the run of play. It was one against the head, wasn't it? Let's be absolutely honest about it on the balance of play. But
completely.
You've got, that's what boxing affords. It affords the balance of play. It affords you against the run of the balls. It gives you that hope and that chance. And he did it, Zach Chelly. And he might well have changed his life with that late turnaround. He might well have.
He's calling out David Benavidez now. Imagine that. Benavidez versus Chelly.
Wow. What a mad game. Jack Rafferty. What a mad game. Jack Rafferty and Brad Ray with big wins on the weekend as well, looking very good. So they've probably set themselves up for a bigger encounter. We'll do a special short preview pod of the action for you next week. Just a short one on Alan Hrgovic, O'Doherty, Hatim, and Michael Gomez Jr. So look out for that. That'll be with you shortly. Coming up next, it's This Week. This week, we take you back to the 8th of May, 1999 at the Hilton, Las Vegas. It's Augie Sanchez, 21-year-old, up against the veteran, colourful, charismatic Jorge Paez. I said I wanted to get Paez on this week. We've done it, but it's not his finest hour. He loses, unfortunately, if you're in the Paez business. Augie Sanchez, probably a coming-of-age fight for him, just a year or so before he'd bump into Naz in a big fight.
He did lose this, but he hadn't lost his outrageous sense of style, had he? Little clump of hair at the top, the front there. I enjoyed that. His ring uniform, I enjoyed that. Cheeky little chappy style. Jorge Paez was a real character back in the day, right at the end of his career now, but still decent, still kind of at that kind of gatekeeper level. You had to be good to get past Jorge Paez. 33 years old, he'd had 70 odd fights. And the first time I was aware of Jorge Paez was in a 15-round fight, 1988, when he won his world title, IBF featherweight title. And he was going into the last round with Calvin Grove, really solid champion in 1988, down on the cards. And Jorge Paez scored 3 knockdowns in the 15th round, one of the last 15-round fights, to win the championship. And that really was an early indicator, even though he might act like a clown and look like a bit of a clown, when the going gets tough, he can really fight. But at this point, he was too late in the day. But the most bizarre thing to come from this fight was the commentary.
Wow. A young
A
Adam Smith.
really young and tempered Adam Smith. God, what's wrong with me today?
Yeah.
He's
It's mad, isn't it?
if his name hadn't come up, I'm confident that at no point during the fight would I have thought it was him commentating.
It's mad. What a lesson. If I'm Adam Smith, I'd go back and listen to this. I'd go back and listen to it. And if you're just a neutral boxing fan, or if you've got any link to broadcasting, it is a fascinating compare and contrast to the commentator Adam Smith has become and the one he was in the early days. Very, very short, clipped sentences, very measured tone, very different kind of delivery, a bit more conversational. It is so interesting to see this very early. This is 99. I think he joined Sky in the mid-90s, so just very early. And obviously Ian Darke would have been the main commentator in the early days. So yeah, a young Adam Smith, stylistically so different to the commentator now. So different.
Yeah, you kind of sense the influenced at that point by your Harry Carpenters. And it was just so measured. It was, the delivery was completely different. The way that he talks now is completely different to how he was then. I can only imagine that at some point someone has had a word with him and just say, we just need a bit more from you. Adam, we need you to give a bit more oomph in there. And goodness me, he found that oomph and ran with it, didn't he?
Mm-hmm. Turbocharged. Yeah. Wow. This is really, really interesting. Really, really interesting. And also the fact that, Sky were sending two of their commentators across to do a bill like this. Obviously, maybe they're thinking of Hamed against Doggy Sanchez in a year or so's time. Maybe it's because Eric Morales topping the bill is kind of quite hot at that time on that terrific super bantamweight run. Maybe that's in it. But Kevin Kelly was on the undercard. He'd fought Naz before. So maybe all of that's at play. But interesting in terms of time and place where Sky Sports were at with their boxing coverage back then.
Yeah, and I think you've probably hit the nail on the head there with the Nassim Hamed, who was still in and around at this point, and I suppose there's various people on that bill that could be a rival to Hamed, so you're building the storylines. Do you think they were there, or do you think they were in a studio many, many miles away? Did they say they were there? I can't remember.
I think they said they were there this week,
right,
but
right.
And I get the sense that that's something that has only become the sort of, we call it off tube when you call the fights from a studio or from a booth when you're not actually there. That's more of a latter day thing, partly because of expenses. Certainly it's how we did it at Box Nation, and that was mainly due to money. When we're doing all the international fights at Box Nation, most of those were done in London. Down in Chiswick, most of those. Obviously, all the UK and European fights you would try and get there, but the international ones, they were all done in a studio, just commentating as if you were there. But that is only in the last sort of 5 years, because probably a sort of lockdown, post-lockdown thing. That's only just become a more modern thing for the bigger broadcasters, where they wouldn't send commentary teams there. That's only a recent thing, and it's partly out of lockdown, but it's partly to do with money as well. I think they just think, these days, can we really justify sending a co-commentator just to do this? So yeah, I think back in the day, I suspect they were there.
Yeah, well, I mean, he's really keeping a lid on it then, isn't he?
Yeah, but I tell you, Paez not keeping a lid on his dress sense, as usual. I mean, as you say, he's got these bright yellow shorts, and then over the yellow shorts, he's got these orange tassels, and it reminds me of when I was a kid. I don't know if you had this, but you go to like your nan or your granddad's, and they'd have these like sort of streamer style blinds in the kitchen
Yes.
instead of a door.
Yes.
Instead of a door, it'd be like in the kitchen or to go into the larder or the pantry. There'd be like these sort of streamer sort of bead sort of things that you would push through to get there. So it's sort of it behaved like a door, but it wasn't a door. That's what Paez has got on the outside of his shorts in bright orange.
I mean, frankly, he looks ridiculous, doesn't he? Or he looks like he's going off to a 1990s rave.
Yes, with a back to front ponytail, with a ponytail on the front of his forehead instead of at the back. Yeah, and everything else is shaved. I mean, what a unique cat! One-time circus performer, wasn't he? He was a trapeze artist and a juggler in the circus once upon a time, and he brought a lot of that flavour to the boxing ring. He was such a good fighter in his day. He's just in this era, he is down the stretch, isn't he? And I think it's a kind of fight of two parts, isn't it? Because Sanchez starts really well, clips Paez in the very first round. They both land with left hooks, but it's the really short. It shows you don't need to load up with a punch if you're a boxer. If you deliver it perfectly, Sanchez, really short, flicked left hand on the inside, left hook, and Paez goes down in the very first round. And it is Sanchez who's boxing really well, good shape, very orthodox, high guard, jab. He does everything sort of quite solidly through those sort of first 2 or 3 rounds. And then Paez does start to come into it, starts to make things a bit uncomfortable, doesn't he? Through the sort of 4th and 5th and 6th rounds, Matt. And the 6th is pretty 50-50.
Paez is definitely coming into it. Kind of that old guile and craft and what have you, and kind of teaching the young pup some new tricks. He's starting to have some success, not to the point where you think the fight is going to literally turn around and Paez is going to post the upset. And then you get the finish, don't you? Jorge Sanchez, one-shot finish. He dropped Hamed as well, didn't he, in the when he would fight him. So he's obviously got the power, and he showed it here. He finished Paez out cold at the end of the fight.
Do you know, I watched on the back of this, I thought, do you know what? I'm going to watch the Hamed fight. It's 4 rounds. I'm just going to watch it. I watched it. It's mad. It's kind of Kevin Kelly all over again. The first round, you think, oh, Hamed looks great. His balance looks good. His feet look good. Movement looks good. And then it just becomes Kevin Kelly all over again. It's just chaos, knockdowns, bad refereeing decisions. Both of them hurt. Hamed ultimately very impressive, but yeah, that's to come in a year or so's time. But here, interesting thing about that 7th round, Sanchez, suddenly you see a bit of foot movement, Matt, don't you? And you suddenly see some angles from him. You don't really see that in the Hamed fight, actually, but you suddenly see it in this, where he starts to suddenly Hatton-like spin around the target, and that's what he gets success with, because it just looks like the start of 7th round, he's becoming a bit uncomfortable. First time he's ever been into a 7th round, by the way, in his entire career. 22, 23 fights in, but he just pivots and he lands a left hook and then a right, and he quickly turns, and Paez is facing in completely the wrong direction. And while Paez is facing in the wrong direction, his foot movement's taking him round to another side, and he whips in a left hook. Paez doesn't see it coming. It's a beautiful sequence, that. Left hook, right, turn, pivot, left hook, bosh. It is majestic boxing.
And you don't think of that, do you, now when you think about it? Or, to be honest, when you suggested this fight, I don't think I saw it at the time. I may have done. I just don't recall seeing it before. But you say Jorge Sanchez, the first thing that comes to mind is that wild fight with Naz. And the first thing that comes to mind with Jorge Paez is what an incredible character he was, and how much I used to just be fascinated by him when I was growing up. From the moment I didn't watch that at the time in 1988, I read about the 3 knockdowns in the 15th round to secure victory on the cards, close cards, because he got the 3 knockdowns. In 1988 against Calvin Grove. And then there's the people might remember, I remember it well, is that there was a guy called Troy Dorsey, who I think was a kickboxer. He'd come into boxing, he wasn't expected to do anything, but he had this 3-fight series with Jorge Paez. Paez was thought fortunate to get the decision the first time round. But really, really lovely memories of when I was just so young and loving everything boxing.
This is one of my favourite periods. It takes me right back to being in London, working away, raving like mad. But it be that sort of period, late 90s, turn of the millennium, where would be the first time I'd sort of absolutely had sort of Sky at home, had the money to buy Sky at home myself. So getting boxing news, buying Boxing Monthly, all of that stuff, and getting right into the boxing. So all of this period of Sky Sports, I just Paez, all of that. There he is, Rocky the dog, back for the first time. While we say thank you to Rocky, let me say thank you to NES Medical as well. They're our great sponsors. They're leading independent experts in ringside medical care. They provide global medical coverage for professional and amateur boxing events, as well as ringside medicine training and also basic life support accredited courses. Boxer safety is their priority. And you can find Neil and the team at nasmedical.co.uk. We thank them, as well as all the Apple Plus subscribers, the lovely Patreons as well. Thank you so much. You keep the pod coming each and every week. You really do. But that late 90s turn of the millennium takes me back to just one of my favorite times being alive, working as a young would-be broadcaster, raving like a lunatic and following boxing diligently. It just, this just brings it to life for me. Paez taking on Augie Sanchez, Hamed in his pomp. Oh, yeah, I love it. I absolutely love it. I love it. And I wonder if there's some younger people now that are looking back on Wardley Dubois with the same kind of, what a weekend to be a boxing fan. Wow. Who are these people? What is this sport?
I hope there are. I really do. I think I think quite naturally, as you get older, you presume that the past was superior. You don't always appreciate the here and now. And the past will appear superior because we were younger, we had more hair, we were better looking, we didn't have anywhere near the amount of responsibilities we've got now. It would seem like a glorious time. So any boxing around that time will quite naturally seem to be the best. But I think if you look at what's happened over the last, well, just take it all in over the last few years in the sport of boxing, some of the fights that we've had, boxing is still boxing. Boxing is still the most thrilling sporting spectacle on the planet when it's well matched. And we saw that last weekend.
It was well matched, well said. Hope you enjoyed, folks. Make sure you tune in the next day or two as well for our weekend preview of Alan Ergovich, etc., etc. Bye for now.